All right. And without further ado, say hey to your auntie, Nakia. Hey, girl. Yes, rich auntie. I like this shirt, too. We got to get one of those.
Yes, the hoodie. It's the hoodie.
I love that. I love it.
So now I'm wearing it proudly, okay?
Ew, okay. Outside is waiting for us. I love it. I love it. Well, first and foremost, Nakia, thank you so much for joining us. I think that this topic, mental health, is a topic I think across the board. But I'm a firm believer that I think sometimes we have uninformed people having those conversations.
Absolutely.
And so I know that we're talking about this. I wanted to bring somebody who's not only who's knowledgeable, but opinion who I value. And so you are one of those people. Absolutely. And so I'm excited. We're going to jump right in. And we already know the first question that I ask everybody, because I'm like a listening junkie. I don't know it's the headphones for me, right? I just love to have things in my ear. So what are you listening to right now?
So I am listening to, so I got really excited because J. Cole just dropped a little teaser. So really excited about that. So I can't wait until he drops the full album. So I actually played that on replay in my car a lot over the past 24 hours. But I am a 90s junkie, so I listen to a lot of 90s music. SWV is about to kill it tonight, okay?
I got my wine ready, sis. I got my wine ready.
I'm ready. I'm an SWV fan. My friends are like, where you watching it at? Because I know you're going to be all in. And then for a podcast, I saw this lady speak at a conference. And it's called, she calls herself the Fear Boss. And she talks about like all these fear experiments and stuff like that. So I'm listening to her podcast, bought her book on Audible. So been listening to that. Yeah, it's really good because it challenges you to step outside your comfort zone. So
I love it.
Audible and her podcast. But definitely 90s Junkie and J. Cole is my best friend. So yeah.
I love this. And you know what? I love this. I'm actually surprised that you even have time to listen to anything, sis, because first and foremost, you've been just, okay, when we talk about growing and glowing, sis, you've been growing and glowing. Okay, my girl just crossed DST. It's the pyramid for me. I cannot. I love it. Okay, we all ended the semester. Thank the Lord. Okay. Shout out to all teachers and students because, listen, virtual school ain't it, okay?
I would not recommend it. 10 out of 10, wouldn't recommend.
Return to sender, absolutely, okay? And now you have this new initiative, this new brand, this new business. Like, tell me more about it. Like, first, I know our listeners want to know who you are, but I really want to know what is Brown Girl Healing? Where did it come from? How did it start? Yes,
absolutely. So, I am a long time lover of therapy in many different ways. That's, I tell people all the time, like, you got to tap into what makes you feel good all the time. And sometimes we feel like that is self-indulgent sometimes. And like, you find yourself like, you know what, that's too much of myself. Right. But I lost my father at an early age. And so I was in therapy from, the age of 9. And my mother voluntarily did that as a Black woman. She has a problem with going to therapy, but she made sure her kids went to therapy. But I went to therapy as a young child. And, I always knew that there was something different about how I handled my father's death and about how other people handle death. Like, I see death differently because I was able to talk that through with a mental health professional from an early age. But then life started happening too. And I started realizing that it wasn't just, dealing with the fact that my father was no longer here. There's a lot of grief and loss that comes with the death of someone because your life is no longer the same. And so there's a part of you that will never be the same. And you're going to miss out a lot. And so as maturation took place, I started realizing there were so many things that were different about me than other people around me. And I was missing out on a lot of things that I didn't realize that I was missing out on, right? Like, you start seeing friends get married and you're like, dang, my father will never walk me down the aisle. My mother's a single mother. She, remarried and then that didn't work out. So I never had like a strong father figure, you know what I mean? And so there's a lot of things that I was missing out on. And I didn't realize, I was messed up. And, I'm just this lovable person. So nobody ever thinks anything's wrong with the kid. And so
that's why raggedy exists though. Like, I think to your point, like I keep saying like Tania, why you say raggedy? Because raggedy is like, we all got some shit with us. We all do. But and we realize it, I think to your point, we realize it so young. Mm-hmm. But because mind you, I'm also grateful to your mother for even exposing you to therapy, because most people grow up internalizing their raggediness to where something's wrong with me.
Yeah. But even still, even with therapy, right? My therapeutic process was, it was directly correlated with what I needed to deal with as it relates to the death of my father, right? And so that stopped after a while.
Right.
But I was good. I was good with not crying in the middle of the night for my father's death. There was a lot of things I was dealing with, but I decided I'm a fucked up individual. Okay. And I deal with life. I deal with it internally because I don't want to share that with everybody else, because I don't want you to judge me. But then after a while, when people that were close to me, when I would use my anecdotal story, happenings to share with them about how they should grow, they'd be like, man, the kid, you don't know how much that got me through. And I was realizing, what? Stop being selfish. Because my therapist, I started going back to therapy as an adult, and my therapist told me one time, because I dealt with some really traumatic stuff as a child outside of my father's death. And I remember breaking down, because she was the first person I shared something with. And I broke down and I was so embarrassed of telling that story. And this was in the beginning of my my counseling program. And she told me something that I will never forget. She said, Nakia, there's so much power in your story. And the more you tell it, the stronger you get. And I just
talked about that.
And I just realized that I got to stop being so selfish, and my power that I gained from telling my story, I can give somebody else the power. So it's you want the abs, right? But you got to keep using that muscle for those abs to grow, right?
Oh, sis, I use the muscle. You got to use the muscle right, because I've been using it to digest food that I shouldn't be digesting. Okay. Yes.
Right. You use it right. So when you use those muscles, they grow, they get stronger. And so you get the product that you want. You get the healing that you want. And so I decided that Brown Girl Healing was going to be me saying in all my imperfections, I'm still growing, I'm still healing, I'm still getting up another day, trying it again. And then when I mess up, this is what it looks like, but I'm going to work through it, and we can do this together. Absolutely. Because I think so many times people look for these picture perfect people, and they're like, okay, I want to be like that. No. Yes. Even in my Brown Girl Healing, I come back and tell my readers and my, and my followers yo, I messed up this week. I was talking, I wasn't walking the walk. And that is so real. And people need to see that, because people need to understand that even when I'm trying, it don't always go right. And I want people to understand, even someone who is about to be a practicing professional in this field still has issues with this. You know what I mean?
I'm a counselor but we're counselors who have counselors, right?
Absolutely.
And I think you talk about it, it's crazy, because even in my spirituality, I struggle with sharing too. Mm-hmm. Because I think when we talk about, being a witness and being a light, I think we misinterpret that as being perfect. Yeah. But to your point, light is, I want people to see what God is doing in my life. I want them to see how he's changed me. When you see this smile and this joy, please know, no man gave it to me. It came from the work that we're doing in the inner me. And that's the witness. That's the light. That's the healing. I love that. Okay. That's Brown Girl Healing. But that brings me, I want to make sure we get a chance to ask amazing questions of you. But you brought up a great point about how just not even just grief, but even healing and processing grief, and even just recovering from trauma, it takes time. And like you said, it's not a one-time thing. It's a over and over, trying and failing over and over again. And I think, again, to your point, when people think about grief, they misinterpret it as it only relates to physical grief, right? And physical death, right? Absolutely. But grief is and I tell people all the time, grief is literally the price that you pay for caring about anything, right? Anything you care about, it's saying like, I lost something that I loved. I lost something that I cared about. And so I guess my question for you is like, in your work within mental health and in that field, how necessary do you feel like grief is? Right. And why do you think, like, mind you, I know even for you, you embrace therapy at a young age, but that isn't the case with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how necessary is grief? But also, why do you feel like it has such a negative stigma?
I mean, because one, I think the biggest thing is that people only think about grief and loss when it's time to talk about death, right? But the reality of it is everybody deals with grief and loss. Everybody, no matter what your profession is, how perfect your family seems to be, everybody deals with grief and loss. When you have any type of changes in your life, major, minor, you're dealing with some type of loss. If you have a major accident, I broke my ankle in a car accident. There was some grief and loss there because I wasn't as mobile as I once was before. And I was dealing with a whole bunch of stuff internally, right? Like I was dealing with a whole bunch of stuff where, I was depressed because I used to work out and I was getting slim. And then I was like, you can't do that no more. You know what I mean? And so I think that the stigma is that, one, people only think that you got to lose somebody to death in order to grieve. But we deal with a lot. We're dealing with grief and loss when it comes to how people are treating Black and brown bodies, right? Because you don't feel comfortable with doing, simple stuff anymore. You're losing the freedom to just do things without this worry, right? So there's a lot of grief and loss. But I think that it's because people associate counseling with people being crazy. Like it's just starting to become a thing where people, like my therapist said, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so we have to, being more intentional about like how we talk about it in these spaces when it comes to Black and brown bodies. And I'm really particular. That's why it's Brown Girl Healing with the U, because it's an us thing, right? Not just a me thing, because I'm really particular about how Black and brown bodies are dealing with their emotions and their feelings. Because we've talked about this, but everybody doesn't have access to healthcare. Everybody doesn't have access to counseling and therapy. And so we have to be more intentional about how we talk about this topic to other people, because even when I told my sister that I was in therapy, she was like, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah. Yeah, but also I think it comes from like media and movies. The therapist they depict on movies, it's like, that ain't my therapist. So to your point, I'm a Black girl, okay, and I need a therapist who understands what it means to navigate this world as a Black girl. So I always tell my therapist, like, you are my paid bestie, okay? Yeah. I pay you to be my friend for an hour. And it's like so that.
Real. That is so real, because one of the things that I had to realize in therapy is that, one, as a therapist, I go to a predominantly white institution, right? I go to GW. I am a minority. So I've worked with, grown professionals in this field who are going to not look like us, but they're going to probably work with us, right? Because we are a minority as Black women therapists, but we need it, right? So that's one of the biggest things, right? But I also understand the value of somebody feeling comfortable and safe and secure and trusting when they're sitting across from somebody that looks like them.
Right.
But understand this though, and this is one thing, a little off topic, but you brought up such a good thing, is that let's not assume that every Black woman is there and understands you the way you want to be understood. Because sometimes it may be a Hispanic woman, sometimes it may be a white woman. You need to have an empathetic therapist.
And you gotta shop around. Like, we don't think about...
It's like dating.
Yes, it really is. Like, I can't tell you, because to your point, it's about comfortability. Because, like, mind you, in therapy, you're very vulnerable and you're sharing a lot of intimate details. In some cases, like, to your point, you're sharing things that you've never actually shared with anybody else. And the same way we're picky with our friends, you got to be picky with who's pouring into you. So I took every consultation I could get. My therapist, she saw me 3 times before she actually really saw the real me. Right? But, like, to your point, but not to assume that because everybody who's your skin folk ain't your kinfolk. Okay, honey? Period.
It is so real, because I remember, like, most recently, because I'm currently shopping around for a new therapist, because most recently I had a therapist, and I talk a lot. And when I go into therapy, I want someone to allow me the space to talk, because Therapy is not about somebody giving you advice. Therapy is about somebody helping you become more aware. And therapy is about helping you, give you the tools to become more aware and to get and guide you to your healing. It's not about somebody telling you what to do. That's life coaching. Therapy allows you to heal, with the support of someone else, giving you the tools and the resources and the bibliotherapy and all the other stuff. But this lady literally, it was a Black girl, and she's literally talked so much. And I was like, when you gonna let me talk? Like, I told you a story and now you want something about your 3 kids and your dog. I don't care.
But that's not a segue, because as a life coach, I run into that issue so many times. So I had to close. I don't allow open applications for coaching, because I have found that people misinterpret like a personal development coach and life coach with a therapist and a counselor, and we are very different. And so I have had clients who want to come and dump their whole life on me. I'm like, oh, we don't do that here. That's therapy. That's therapy. So can you break down the difference between the two for those who are shopping for therapists?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest things is that, like, therapy helps you to process, right? It helps you. I mean, that's the most simplest way to put it. Therapy helps you to process. Therapy gives you coping mechanisms. Therapy allows you to become more aware, right? But when you think about life coaching is giving you direction. Life coaching is saying, okay, these are some steps we can take. Let's talk about your needs, right? What do you need? What are you wanting? What are you desiring as it relates to your career, your family, whatever it is, whatever aspect of life coaching it is? They're giving you steps.
Right.
But, therapy is more about processing, because you have to understand what it is that motivates you to do why you do what you do, and how it is that stuff plays out and how it manifests in your everyday life. Life coaching doesn't give you that. Because at the end of the day, you're looking for someone in life coaching. You're looking for someone to tell you what to do. You don't come to therapy looking for someone to tell you what to do. Because one of my clients that I had in my practicum, she used to always be like, well, Miss Nakia, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, what do you think? And I had this one story where I had a client who literally, she asked me, what would I do in that situation? And I said, I couldn't tell you that, because you and I are two totally different people. Because she decided she wanted to write a nasty letter to somebody. And I was like, read me the letter. Let's okay. Read me the letter. She read me the letter. I was like, oh, interesting. And you think that reading that to somebody else, they're going to want to still be your friend. And she was like, what do you think? I said, what do you think? Would you want me to read it back to you so you can hear it? Like, and so it's like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's a stupid idea. Don't do that.
Absolutely. Because even to your point, a lot of times too, while I think I've learned to value therapy, is that we already have the answer.
Absolutely.
You already have it. And so most time with therapy, I don't know if people think it actually happens in therapy, but really they're just asking you questions to help you discover the answer that you already had for yourself. Right.
Some kind of processing questions. As therapists, we ask a lot of open-ended questions. We're not asking you a lot of yes or no questions. We're asking open-ended questions because we want you to really tell that story. And then you'd be like, you know what? It wasn't my mom's fault. It was me.
Yes.
I made that decision, and it's like, and then, you have clients who have aha moments in therapy all the time and be like, wow. And they have breakthrough, because when they tell that story from a different perspective, when you start to ask them different aspects of that story, different details of that story, and they're like, wow.
Okay, this is a good segue for 2 questions. I want to ask both, because I think to that point, I want to make sure I insert that for life coaching and why it's different. Because on the opposite end, I have clients who just want to come and talk. But to your point, life coaching is action-based. When you come to me, you have to be ready to do the work, which is why it was so important to have this Crayons Still Color series before we jumped into anything else. Because if you're not in the season where you actually, it's not just wanting to change. When you get to me, you got to be ready to do the work. Because in our session, we're doing the work. If you want to process, that's your friend, that's your therapist, that's whoever you need to go to. But once you've done that, Then they pass you off to me, and now we get to the work. So I love that. But you talked about I call them aha moments too. So it's so funny that you call it an aha moment, because that's what I tell my clients. We call it the aha or your full circle moment, when everything comes, when it comes back around again to your full circle.
Yeah.
And so I guess kind of even going back through, like, we talk about this idea of healing. That's a buzzword now. Right? Healing, grief, trauma, these are all buzzwords. But you talk about how you have to process it, and how you realize that through the processing, things start to click, and you have your aha moments. So I guess let's talk more about, what does grief look like, or what does processing grief look like in that healing, I guess from a therapist's point of view.
I think it's a lot of times it's allowance, right? You have to allow yourself to grieve. Because a lot of times when we think about grief, and we talked about this earlier, is when, we only think about like death, right? But we only think about death in the sense of like allowing people normal grief when it's like their mom, their dad, their sister, their brother. It's like, oh, your grief makes sense, right? And so one of the things I want anybody to understand when it comes to grief is that there's this thing called disenfranchised grief, where people don't allow you to grieve, but you have to allow yourself to grieve, right? It's like simple stuff or complex stuff. Like the other day, my professor passed away. My grief counseling professor passed away days after we had him in class, and the semester wasn't over. Right?
Mind you, the end of the semester. You said it wasn't over, but it was like the end of the semester. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And so, he had taught us so much about grief. Like when I tell you now, I look at grief so much differently because of him. So thank you, Dr. Schutte, rest in peace. But he was so intentional about allowing us the space to grieve things that people don't allow you to grieve. And then not giving people bad words. Like, it's going to be okay. How? And so disenfranchised grief is this thing where we are not normally societal allowed to grieve something, right? Like pets or graduating from college. Like, you are grieving because you're like, I'm a real life adult.
My personal, I was telling somebody before, I'm like, I found out that I was a mistress when I was dating. And like people were really rushing me to get over, like, Tania, he's just like not who he thought he was. I'm like, that takes time to realize that a person is not who you
they
thought
said they were.
Yeah, because it was so real to me. I was making real plans and making real steps towards this thing. And I'm like, it was to your point, you mentioned it before, even with you, about how you feel embarrassed to share and you feel shamed to share because you don't feel like you have the space to really grieve. That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's so real because, like, I know one of the things that we talked about one day in class that was so real, and I was like, I never even thought about that, is that, like, when you have the mistress, right, and they have been in this full-blown relationship with this person, and then that person dies, they can't even go to the funeral. Like, imagine what that's like to process that, right? Because nobody is saying that you can be sad that the man that you've been sleeping with or having this relationship with when he had a whole nother family, he's passed away. So what do you do? And I think that that's the biggest thing, to go back to your question, is like, you have to allow yourself the space to say that that's not okay. Then you have to make a wellness plan, like tap into the things that are going to make you okay. I just read this book called 100 Practical Ideas to Cope, the loss of a grieving, for a grieving adult. I'm messing up the title, but it's a book about 100 practical ideas for somebody that's grieving the loss of a parent as an adult. And there's so much that can be transferred to other areas of grief. Like, it's just simple stuff like, going and taking a walk or whatever it is that you need to give yourself the space to process something, because it's not linear. Like, the process doesn't happen just in this one straight line. It doesn't say these are the steps. They're different tasks that you have to do, but they're not in order. Some people deal with things differently. So you have to understand that it's a personalized process and individualized, and you can't have someone tell you this is the way it's supposed to be.
I was just telling them about this. I walked them through like the stages of grieving. I was talking about how you might see 5 and 7, about how they're all different, but how they can be occurring simultaneously. I think I saw an infographic once that had like, this is how we think grief looks. this is how it really looks. And it was like a squiggly line. But I think to your point, I want to go back about how, because we use the term processing, right? But it is that really weird squiggly line and squiggly circle. But what does processing really mean? Does that mean that you're looking at the same thing over and over again and you're looking at it from different angles? What does processing actually mean? How do you fully process when something happens to you, especially when it's traumatic?
I mean, but I think that that's another thing that's not, it's subjective. Like processing can be subjective as well, because processing, say for instance, you're in group counseling, processing means like, what is it doing for you right now? Not what did it do for you back then, but what is it doing for you right now when you share that story, right? Live in the here and now when it comes to certain things. So if you tell the story, like you telling the story right now with you and I talking about, you found out you were a mistress. What is that? What feelings does that bring up for you in this moment? And that's something that you process, right? And you start to process your words and the comments of other people. And you start to think about like, wow, it's not that I didn't get over it. It's not that it happened and I was hurt and I cried back then. It's like, I'm not over it right now. And right now it's bringing up anger. Right now it's bringing up shame. Right now it's bringing up guilt. It's like, what is it doing for you right now is a type of processing, right? But there's also a type of processing that allows you to take a step back and look at what happened 20 years ago. It takes you, to say, that's what happened to me as a 6-year-old. And I've never been the same, because at 6 years old, this grown man touched me. And now I think that that's okay, right? And so there's a lot of ways you can process things, because, there's so many different like schools of thoughts when it comes to therapy. And so people think about like the processing in different ways, because my processing, I'm a narrative therapist. And I think we play the lens of play therapy. And so processing sometimes to me looks like just telling that story and then thinking about like, how's your worldview changed? And so there's so many different ways that processing can, show up. And so to answer your question, like it just looks differently. It's what you need, right? And then that's why to your point earlier about shopping around for therapists, right? Do your research. It's not just like you dating, okay? And you done found them on Facebook and see what kind of job they got. You did your research.
The Carfax. I need the Carfax.
You did your research. It's the same thing with therapy as well, because therapists are going to have like their therapeutic orientation on their websites. They're going to say that, they do CBT. And you probably as a scientist, you're like, what is CBT? That doesn't come up in your profession. So you got to research. Like, what does it mean to be a cognitive behavior therapist? What does it mean to be a narrative therapist? What does play therapy really mean? What is Sandtray, right? It's like, it's so many different things you'll see on these people's websites, and you'll be like, okay, she's pretty. She accepts my insurance. Let me go with her. No.
Right. But they also had like specializations, because even to your point, when I was seeking a therapist, I'm saying to myself, like, wait, what do I actually, when I was searching for them, I noticed that they had like specializations. I'm like, well, what do I actually need? And so I had to think about, okay, well, what areas are my traumas in? But who can best represent this? So I was looking at like, childhood trauma, people who dealt with relationships. Like I found people who would specialize in the areas that I needed the most help in, so they could help me navigate my aha moments. Which I kind of want to come back to. I guess again, I love natural conversations, because it all just flows and makes sense. Because even to that point, I think in telling the story, sometimes I've had my own personal ahas, or I've had clients who have ahas based off of how they tell the story. Because I have heard and I've read and I've somewhere I told you I'm a listen junkie, I'm an info junkie. That how you tell a story tells you whether or not, or where you are in your healing journey.
Process. Yeah.
Is that real? Okay.
So real. I mean, and that's why I love narrative therapy, right? Because narrative therapy, it's this process of like retelling the story. And so when you think about my example with the 6-year-old girl that was touched, right? So many times, even as a 6-year-old, she victimized herself, and she was the problem. Somebody has told her she was too fast. And it was all these things that these people have been telling this child, right? And so she's constantly saying that she did something, or what she said was that the details of the story that she's pulling out has something to do with how she did it. And it doesn't make the person
accountable.
yeah, and it doesn't make them this terrorist, right? It doesn't make them this villain. It makes that child, that's inside of you, the villain, the victim, the person who is, who did this, right? And so when you think about like how the process and take place for that particular client, it's them retelling that and them starting to say in that storytelling that this person screwed them up. This person did it. And, and they have control over what happens next. And it's not that person's, role in how they did it. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like you start to retell the story, you start to change your worldview, and you start to say, you know what? I'm taking ownership of everything that happened, but I'm not taking blame for it. And there's a difference in that. And so there's like, when you think about the processing and how your story changes, you start to use different words and the narrative looks different. The story looks different. And so when we say like you build those muscles when you keep telling the story, you have to understand that those muscles, like you said, with the food, right? Yeah, you could use those stomach muscles all the time. But if you keep putting Doritos in that, if that's what you're doing, it's not going to get better. But if you start to feed yourself healthy stories, if you start to feel the healing is like the healthy food, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're starting to do the ab workouts. Then you're starting to do the crunches. Then you're starting to figure out what your wellness plan is. Because I love me a good wellness plan. And I tell my friends that they are part of my wellness plan all the time. And so I am not a loner. And so when I'm going through, I call my friends. When I'm going through, I want to spend time with my friends because it heals me. It helps me to be reminded that there are people that love me despite whatever I'm going through. Right. And so that's my healing plan. And so when we think about that storytelling, it's like, when a kid, it's not that you depend on your friends. It's that that's who you are. You know what I mean? Like, and it's the storytelling. You start to tell that stuff differently. Because I remember I used to think I was a burden to some of my friends. My friends was like, Nakia, you're the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Like, what are you talking about?
It's like, it's almost like, I love how you even put it, and I can't wait for next week's episode talking about forgiveness, about how this idea when things happen, you have to separate. Like like to your point, many times depending on how you were raised, we're internalizing all of it and we're victimized, like, right? Or we're putting it all on someone else. It's like, no, when it comes to trauma, you have to sort. There are some parts, like to you, sometimes you happen to you and you have to own the parts where you happen to you. But then sometimes there are things that are not your fault, that were beyond your control, and that you have to learn how to let those things go. Because we can't control the other person apologizing, them realizing what they did, their vengeance, but we can detach and say, you will no longer have that hold on me. And so I love that you mentioned that, and that's a shameless plug for staying tuned for next episode, because I love talking about that. But you brought up two things that I want to get to the wellness plan before we because we only have a few minutes left to get that. But those Doritos, right? So we use the Doritos in that analogy. Mm-hmm. But I think just like that in real life, we say we're healing, we say self-care, we say all these buzzwords, but we don't realize sometimes that what we're doing might actually be more barriers than they are actually helping. So what do you feel like are both intentional and unintentional barriers to healing?
I think it's when we're not real with ourselves, right? Like we have to talk about our needs.
Just to let you know, Nakia, you did not know about the 5 principles about being real to heal. So she didn't know that what I told y'all before. Okay, so this is somebody who is coming in, did not know we are on to something. Okay, so thank you for that. So just that confirmation, thank you.
But no, I think that it's so important for you to think about your needs and stop thinking about it in this because self-care is such a buzzword. Mm-hmm. But I think self-care is totally different. Like my friends will laugh and joke and they'd be like, oh, that's your self-care? And I'd be like, absolutely. Because boundaries are my self-care. No, I will not.
We call them big B's around here. Big B's. Yep.
No, I will not. No. What you want to come to this? No. What's wrong with you? Nothing. I don't want to go. And so, I think that it's so important for us to think about those things, right? Like, because all these things are buzzwords. And so you really have to tap into what it is that you need. And all transparency, one of my biggest struggles is men. Because people have always told me, you're so pretty. Why you don't have no man? Why you ain't? Why you so great? You so successful. And I'd be like, that's not helpful.
You know, people just don't know what to say.
And it's helpful because I don't like. I told I remember telling my cousins one time, this was like some New Year's ago, and they was like, Nikki, you ain't bringing a man around us in a minute. I was like, I'm trying to be like, y'all, like, look at y'all, how y'all treat women. And
that's pressure. It's unintentional pressure.
Like we had this running joke before my grandmother passed away, when we used to host Thanksgiving at her house. It was like they always brought a different woman to my grandmother's house, and I used to be like, so if a dude takes me to Thanksgiving, I should expect that I'm not gonna be there next year. So that what we're doing? Bet. Okay, decided. And so it was like those things where I realized what I needed was to take a step back from dating sometimes. What I needed is to like tell my friends, my guy friends, like, help me process this. What does that mean? Like, let me get out of my head, because what somebody else is doing to get through it is not what you can do to get through it. It's not always the same thing. And so like those things are individualized. Like, I think that so many times we look at the internet, we look at social media for how we should be doing it. But every time, everybody's not doing it the way you need to be doing it.
I was like you. I was dating, and I realized when they started to get like, it's different when they didn't like me back. When they like me back, I'm like, I don't want this. And I had to come to terms like, what? Like people assume that because you're single, it's because it's always because you don't want to. It's like sometimes people are single because we want to be. I'm like, I realize I don't actually want to date right now. Not because
it's different, because like, I think that one of the biggest things is that, like, we always looking for somebody to complete us, right? Like that's how the people talk about it, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
But it's so wrong. It's so wrong, because I feel like 100% and 100%. You can't be 50 and 50. You can't, because what happens is that my insecurities becomes your burden, because I haven't dealt with that, and I haven't tried to start processing that. And now it becomes a process of us, because if I'm the person that just wants to get married just so I can say I'm not single, then now I don't really want to be with you, my brother. I don't want to be with you.
My thing is real, right? And it's also it creates codependency. Because now if you got with that person to make you feel confident, now if they walk out, they have the ability to take your confidence with them.
So much power over you. And I had to realize that in some of my past relationships, is because that's not why I was in the relationship. I had to realize that. Like, even this last dude I was dating, I realized I didn't even really like him.
Don't that be like you think you're okay? Like I think I need somebody because everybody else is telling me that I need somebody. So let me go ahead and you seem like somebody I might need. Come here. Yeah. All right, now go away because I don't like you no more. Absolutely, yeah. I love that. But you know what? So thank you. I appreciate that. I think so. I would even say as a takeaway to that. And I mentioned it to them before, but being mindful who you go to, right? Because again, people, to even see your point, when people are like, where's your man at? Like, people can say things, and even though they don't intend to put pressure on you, they don't intend to make you feel a way, sometimes people can project their own stuff on you, and you can take it and own it. And so I'm a firm believer, like, yes, rely on your friends, have a great community, but know who to go to who for.
Absolutely. Listen, but I had to learn it the hard way. Same. Because there's some people in my life that I will let them remain nameless. But there are people in my life who, I felt like I could tell everything to. But then it was like, and then when I'm trying to take their advice and their opinions into the space where I need them to be utilized, then now I'm screwing myself over.
And it's not you. You like, that wasn't even me. I wouldn't even do it like that. For real.
Listen, I wouldn't even handle that situation that way, but I use all his opinions. And then, I think that I call myself an R&B thug.
Facts. I'm a spiritual gangster right here. Spiritual gangster right here.
I'm a top Christian, okay? But it's like, I'll be like, that's some effed up shit. And then I'll be like, God, how I'm supposed to do that? God, listen, like, because I had to realize that there's so many times we look for answers in all the wrong places, because your circle can be a powerful circle, and you can, like, there's value in every member of your circle, but understand that everybody doesn't have the expertise that you need, like that. And that's a real thing. Like, I had one of my girlfriends, She said to me the other day, she holds me accountable. Now, she's my girlfriend and my line sister now.
Ow.
But I said to her the other day, I was like, oh yeah, I was at such and such's house. And she was like, why?
Oh.
Just why?
You felt exposed, didn't you? You had to cover up.
It was so crazy because I was talking to one of my girlfriends, another girlfriend on the way to such and such's house. And she didn't say anything. Like, didn't hold me accountable for that person not being okay for me. And my line sister says to me, why? I was like, oh, because he wanted to go to dinner. She was like, why did you go? Like, and it's just like, that person is the person I go to when I'm talking through my bad decisions when it comes to men. That person hears the ins and outs because she's going to hold me accountable for what the role that I played in it and my job. You know what I mean? And so you have to be really intentional about who you talk to about what.
I love that.
For them.
And I love that. And I think, so I guess kind of shifting, and again, I love these, but I hate them because we live in a society where people can't listen to things for a long time. So I hate that we got a time, because they raggedy. We gotta cut our stuff short. Because I could talk about this all day. But I think to your point, I think in this season I'm learning that I tend to go to friends and Google first before I go to God, right? The big G. I can't wait to get to that episode. But like, we go to friends, to like people who are in the same situations that we are in to help us. We go to the things that broke us to fix us. So like, for those people who necessarily can't, who don't have access to friends who can hold them accountable, and to therapists and to counselors and all these things. Or I always say yes, of course, to go to God first, right? And I do talk to him. I love that you said that about how you talk to him, because I think I'm always saying like, no, how I talk to y'all right now is how me and God, I be like, hey, yo, you better get her. When I was, okay, so here's what happened.
Seriously?
Literally, like, so 2 weeks ago, I'm not lying. I was in the grocery store and the cashier had an attitude. Mind you, I was in a good mood. No, I ain't lying. I was listening to Cardi B. So I ain't gonna lie. Music has a power, okay? Y'all be mindful, but I was lit. So I was shopping, I was lit. And so I get to her line and she's banging my groceries. She didn't speak. I'm like, ooh. And then I forgot what she asked me. I said, you know how in the movie, the TV show, where they freeze the scene, and then like that person's like talking to the audience. I said, God, you better get her. Or you better get me, because I'm about to scan her. I'm about to run her across this scanner if she don't stop banging my stuff. Right? But I love that it's not just me. Like he wants us to be our full selves, because he can't fix what we don't show him, right? God ain't kicking down doors. He walks through doors that we open for him, because the most powerful thing he's ever given us is choice. And I love that. And so if you don't have the friends, and if people who are still kind of figuring out who God is for them, what are some other tools and resources? I know you mentioned a wellness plan. What are some things that people can do to be a part of their own rescue, in the words of brother Kevin Hart?
Right. Evangelist. But like, I think that it's so funny that we don't just take a step back and say, like, what is it that you need, Nakia? You know what I mean? And that's what that wellness plan is. And it's not something that you need a professional to help you with. Like, a wellness plan is what is it that you need in the moment where you are struggling. Like, everybody doesn't do well with yoga. Yoga stresses me out, actually, because I can't do all the poses and stuff.
Okay, and downward dog hurts. Ain't nothing sexy about that.
And I'm just like, I'm flexible, God. What's this? Why I can't? But everybody doesn't meditate well, right? Like, I can't meditate for too long, because then I just probably think I just be sitting in my chair like, dang, did I ever?
Okay, I was at a spiritual retreat, like y'all feel these flies? Everybody else like this. I'm like this. I know y'all saw that. Like, y'all ain't see that?
It's like, what do you need? Because it's like simple stuff for me. Like, I'm a foodie. And so my wellness plan sometimes is like, okay, no more salads. I'm going to go to Crafty Crab and get me a crab boil, because it makes me feel good. But, it's like, oh, call your friends, see what they're doing. FaceTime your best friend. Like, I talk to, some of my friends on the phone all the time because I need that, because my life is stressful and because it's very hectic at times and because it's very demanding. People take a lot from me in my regular life. So I have to be able to find spaces where people can pour back into me or let me just talk. Like my best friend, I love her to death. She got a 1-year-old baby and she just let me talk. She be letting me talk and she be asking me questions, right? Because that's like, look, right. Her Sky be in the background screaming and crying. And she be like, and then what happened? I'll be like, I didn't tell you about that.
That's a real friend. That's a sister, not a friend. Sister, right there.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so it's like, what do you need? Like, I can't tell you go buy candles. Everybody doesn't like candles. You know what I mean? Everybody's stuff look differently. I journal, but I don't journal all the time. Like I'm not a journal every day. That's not who I am. Like sometimes my self-care is like, I've been through a lot this week. I'm gonna write about that. But it's also just telling people about it. Like whatever. It's like so many different ways self-care. Like you can Google 100 self-care ideas because that's what your wellness plan can consist of.
Absolutely.
And so when you think about it, it's like, do you need to listen to an expert? Like podcasts and Audible and, everybody don't have time to sit down and read a book, right? But you can get an Audible and you can listen to the book while you're in the car, and so that you can block out the craziness that's happening around you. And so it's so many different ways that you can think about, like, what is your means for healing? And don't think that you have to, relegate self-care to just going to the nail salon or going getting your hair done or buying some candles and, meditating. Like, that's not it. Because I tell people all the time, sometimes self-care is decluttering my email.
Cutting off your cell phone or not answering the phone. Sometimes my self-care is dancing and I have this new thing where I just dance. I think it's like a sign of happiness and joy. You just dance. Yes, sis, I be in the mirror like this.
I do it too.
That's me, child. Music video. That's me. Don't go chasing.
I be sliding in the daggone hallway in my apartment, like. But it's because it's happiness, like. Because there's a difference between happiness and joy, right? Happiness is temporary, and joy is something that's within you, and nobody can take that from you. I love Kirk Franklin. He in one of his songs is like, happiness anybody can take away from you, but joy is something that's within you. Like nobody can steal that from you.
Favor. It's his song Favor.
Yes.
He did it on Tiny Desk. It was lit. I love it. It was good. It was good.
Nobody can take that from you. And so, yes, you have to have those moments where you have to snap back into have that happy moment, but you got to figure out what that joy is for you. Because, my best friend, she reminds me all the time. She was like, brown girl healing wouldn't do that. And I'd be like, you know what, you're right. I'm not doing that.
Yes, it's accountability. And you know what? It's so funny when you're talking, I Googled it. There are 1 million wellness plan templates for free on Google. If y'all don't get y'all asses to Google, get you a wellness plan, get you some accountability. Some accountability. Because also to that point, I want to end with this because even I know a process of sharing, because, we did all of this and I've learned too that, especially in this society when everyone's judging everyone and we're easily offended, everyone isn't open to sharing. I think it's first being selective about who you share, but also you ain't got to tell the whole thing. Some friends, I can just go like, listen. Like I have some friends I can go like, I don't got to tell them what happened. I'm going to like, listen. Something just happened to me. This is what I need from you. They ain't gonna ask you no questions. They gonna go, okay. And real friends, real people, you don't gotta tell them. Like, listen, I'm experiencing high levels of stress, high levels of anxiety. I need this from you. Mm-hmm. And that's it. Okay? And of course, there's God and Google.
Yes, because in therapy, we learned that sometimes asking certain questions, you have to take a step back and be like, what was the purpose of that question? Right? So when you go to your friends and you're like, I need you, I've been dealing with something. Right? And then if you have that friend that's like, what happened? Who's benefiting from me telling that story?
Right. Why do you need to know that to help me? Do you need to know that to help me?
You don't need that. You don't need that information. And so you have to check your friends on that as well, too. And I think that's something that we have to learn. I learned that in therapy, in my program when I was starting about, questions and, in the therapeutic practice. But it's like you ask questions that make sense. And so when somebody asks me a detailed question, I'm like, well, why do you need to know that? To help me get through what I'm getting through. Mm-hmm. Is that going to help you provide the support that I need? If it's not, then that's not necessary. I'm not ready to share that. And if you're having friends that are badgering you about sharing stuff, watch your friends. but that's another topic. But go ahead.
Absolutely. And you know what, though? That's also why this podcast came to be, because there was a season where I didn't feel like I had any friends, or I didn't have friends who could support me in this journey. And so the Cool Auntie came to be because for those people who don't have people who are pouring into them, who are holding them accountable, they know they can come here, and then we're gonna keep it real with them. And so, as always, we like to end with, I love, for me, I think of my aunties. I think of like these pearls of wisdom. Okay, pearls. Pearls of wisdom. What's the one? Well, first and foremost, I want to make sure it's on the record. I want to say thank you, not only for sharing your personal story, but okay, y'all don't know, but my good sis battled weather, okay, and Black women and weather, we don't play, okay? My good sis battled a lot to get here and show up for me and for y'all. So y'all show her appreciation, but also, Nakia, I love and appreciate you for that. So thank you.
I love you too. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. But if you had to leave our listeners, our nieces, our nephews with one piece of wisdom, if they got nothing else from this and from you, what's the one thing that you would say to them?
Very simple. And this is what I live my life by now. And that is pour into you. If you don't do anything else, pour into you. Put you first. Because there's a reason why on an airplane, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on before you help anybody else. Because if you aren't living, and you aren't filled, and you don't have the oxygen, and you don't have everything you need to survive, you can't help nobody else. So you need to take care of you. Self-care is important. It's not an option. It's a necessity.
Period.
So that's what
Period.
Yes.
Like I always say, you cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's one of those mic drop, like, I ain't got to say shit else. Because it is what it is. It is what it is. And so with that, I want each of y'all to have an amazing week. Again, Nakia, thank you so, so much. And as always, I love y'all. Call me back.